The two most dangerous giants in the Bible are first and foremost Og, king of Bashan. Og was a powerful and infamous Amorite king of Bashan who reigned in Ashtaroth during the time of Moses and fought against the Israelites on their way back to the Promised Land. God granted the Israelites victory over King Og's forces, and Moses and the Israelites captured Bashan, a fertile land to the east of the Jordan River. Due to Og's terrifying strength and the relative inexperience of the Israelite forces, the victory was significant. Before the Israelites' encounter with Og, king of Bashan, there was a battle with another Amorite king, Sihon. Moses had asked Sihon to allow the Israelites to pass through his land, promising not to take any of the Amorites' resources along the way. But Sihon instead gathered his forces and attacked the Israelites. God helped Moses and the Israelites defeat the Amorites and take their land. In Numbers 21:33-35 we read, "Then they turned and went up by the way of Bashan, and Og the king of Bashan came out against them, he and all his people, to the battle at Edrei. But the Lord said to Moses, Fear him not, for I have delivered him into thy hand, and all his people and his land, and thou shalt do to him as thou did unto Sihon king of the Amorites, who dwelt at Heshbon. So they smote him and his sons and all his people, until there was none left him alive, and they possessed his land. Og, king of Bashan, came out against them. This was another battle that Israel did not initiate, but Israel was more than up to the challenge, and through their God won a glorious victory. Fear him not, for I have delivered him into thy hand, was necessary encouragement, because Og of Bashan was known for his size and strength. Og was another Amorite king, who was not a threat to Israel, because the Lord had already given him and his domain to Israel. The outcome of the fight between Og's forces and Moses' forces was predetermined before Og had put on his armor. The battle between Og's forces and Moses' forces is described in Deuteronomy 3:3-5. So the Lord our God also delivered into our hands Og king of Bashan and all his army. We smote them, until none was left to him remaining, and we took all his cities at that time. There was not a city which we took not from them. 60 cities, all the region of Argob, the kingdom of Og and Bashan. All these cities were fenced with high walls, gates, and bars, beside unwalled towns a great many, and we utterly destroyed them, as we did unto Sihon king of Heshbon, utterly destroying the men, women, and children of every city. But all the cattle and the spoil of the cities we took for a prey to ourselves. Like Sihon, Og led all his army into battle against Israel, and in the case of Sihon, God had already decided to deliver the king along with all his army and land to Israel. Israel destroyed the entire population and took control of all 60 cities in Og's kingdom, which had the same high walls as those of Sihon. When God decided to deliver an enemy to his people, even strongly fortified cities were no match for the power of God. In the future, when they came to Jericho, the most impactful illustration of this reality would take place there. He was also a huge man with an iron bed that measured 9 cubits in length and 4 cubits in width, which is equivalent to 13.5 ft in length and 6 ft in width. The inclusion of this detail highlights Og's size. A man who needed a bed of this size was probably very tall, around 10 or 11 ft. Israel triumphed against Sihon and Og and took control of their extensive lands on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. After being defeated, it was clear that Og was not a weak ruler. Israel had no reason to be anxious about the size of their opponents. All that was required of them was to remember how powerful their God was. In Deuteronomy 3:1, For only Og king of Bashan remained of the remnant of the giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bed of iron. Is it not in Rabbath of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man. His colossal bed had become famous and was undoubtedly kept as a memento. The news of the victory spread quickly, instilling fear in the hearts of those in Canaan. Rahab, a prostitute from Jericho, believed that the Lord had power even over that strongly fortified city, because she and others had heard of the victory over Sihon and Og. In Joshua 2:1, we read,
For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites that were on the other side Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. Moses used the victory to encourage the Israelites as he left them in Joshua's care on the verge of entering Canaan.
In Deuteronomy 31:4 and in Psalm 135:7-11, who causes the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth, who makes lightning for the rain, who brings the wind out of his treasuries, who smote the firstborn of Egypt, both of man and beast, who sent tokens and wonders into the midst of thee, O Egypt, upon Pharaoh and upon all his servants, who smote great nations and slew mighty kings, Sihon king of the Amorites, and Og king of Bashan, and all the kingdoms of Canaan. And in Psalm 136:18-20, and slew famous kings, for his mercy endures forever, Sihon king of the Amorites, for his mercy endures forever, and Og king of Bashan, for his mercy endures forever. According to Deuteronomy 3:1, Og was a descendant of the Rephaim, indicating a man of great stature or a giant. In Joshua 12:4, and the coast of Og king of Bashan, which was of the remnant of the giants, that dwelt at Ashtaroth and Edrei. Og is referred to as the last of the Rephaim in Deuteronomy 3:1, and later in the books of Numbers and Joshua. Rephaim is a Hebrew word for giants. The Rephaim or Rephaites were a people who lived in Canaan and other places during the time of Moses and Joshua. The term Rephaim is descriptive, not ethnic, meaning the terrifying ones. The Rephaim were giants accustomed to battle. When the Israelites first attempted to enter the Promised Land, the spies reported that it was inhabited by giants known as the Nephilim and the sons of Anak. The repeated references to the Rephaim in these early chapters demonstrate that Israel, trusting in God, was more than capable of defeating this fearsome race of warriors. It also shows that their fear of these men was unfounded. In Numbers 13, when they refused to enter the Promised Land, their excuses appear weaker in light of the victories of the following generation. Nothing is too difficult for God. Nothing is impossible for him. In Matthew 19:26, but Jesus looked at them and said, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Second is Goliath. Goliath was a Philistine giant. The Philistines are enemies of the Israelites and were gathered for war. It wasn't long ago that the Philistines had been completely defeated, but now they are making a comeback. They came down into Israeli territory and appear to have taken possession of part of it as they camped in an area controlled by Judah. In 1 Samuel 17:1-3, now the Philistines gathered their armies to battle and were gathered together at Shoco, which belongs to Judah, and pitched between Shoco and Azekah in Ephes-dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. The valley of Elah was more like a large canyon than a small valley. In 1 Samuel 17:4, and there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. We don't immediately understand what this means at first glance, because we don't measure things by cubits or spans, but count them by feet and inches. So let's put it in terms we can understand. Goliath was a huge man, probably about 9 feet 9 inches tall, and if you add to his height the length of his arms when he raised them over his head, you can imagine what an imposing creature he must have been. But it wasn't just his size. In 1 Samuel 17:5-6, he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a javelin of brass between his shoulders. The staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. He was dressed in what we would call chainmail. The Philistines prepared for battle by wearing a massive piece that resembled canvas, and was covered with overlapping bronze rings. This chainmail protected the wearer from the shoulders to the knees against the weapons used by the opponent. This particular style and size of armor weighed 5,000 shekels of brass, which is equivalent to between 175 and 200 LEBs in modern standards. Goliath was armed with a bronze helmet, bronze greaves to protect his shins, and a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders. All these elements were made of bronze. Only the head of his spear was made of iron and weighed 600 shekels, which are approximately 20 to 25 lebes. According to the written account, he was accompanied by a shield bearer who walked in front of him. The Hebrew word used here refers to the larger shield used in battle, which is large enough to protect an adult. It's very clear that its purpose was to protect his body from the arrows shot by the enemy. Thus, in addition to his armor, Goliath had this man running ahead of him wielding a man-sized shield for additional defense. Take a moment and allow your mind to visualize the impressive scene you've just read. Imagine the terror you'd feel if you had to face a colossus of this size who was also protected by so much armor. Undoubtedly, the odds are against anyone crazy enough to face him in battle. Notice what this giant warrior did in 1 Samuel 17, 8-9. Goliath stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. Again, the Philistine challenged the battle lines of Israel that day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, named Jesse, who had 8 sons. Jesse was old in the days of Saul, advanced in years. His 3 eldest sons had followed Saul to battle. The names of his 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. Now the 3 eldest followed Saul, but David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. The Philistine Goliath came out morning and evening and took his stand for 40 days. Goliath suggested a popular strategy in Eastern civilization, namely representative combat, or one-on-one conflict. He would represent the Philistine army, while the chosen one from Israel would represent the Israeli army. Whoever won, his army was victorious, and whoever lost, his entire army lost. During the course of a good month and a half, he paraded there every morning and evening, boasting of his size and his power, and challenging anyone to fight against him. A young man named David was tending his father's flock of sheep at the time, and did so in the small town of Bethlehem, located in the mountains of Judah. He was far too young to join the army. In fact, David probably wasn't aware of the existing situation between the Israelites and the Philistines at that time. It's possible that he hadn't even heard of Goliath. His only knowledge was that his 3 older brothers were serving in Saul's army, so Jesse called David to run an errand. In 1 Samuel 17:17-18, And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren. And carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. David had no intention of fighting. His father had simply sent him to deliver some snacks to his brothers and show his care for them. The sun rose like any other morning that day, for both David and Goliath. There was no warning, but in reality, Goliath's morning challenge would be his last, and David's heroic life would begin. David rose early the next day, and did exactly what his father had advised, left his flock of sheep with another shepherd, and as he approached the vicinity of the Israeli camp, he noticed the troops preparing for battle, and heard the war cry. He simply wished to observe what was happening. Then David hurried to the front line, and went in to greet his brothers, leaving the supplies in the care of the equipment keeper. While there with his 3 brothers, David hears a loud shout from across the valley, and then everyone in his immediate vicinity starts running back and hiding inside their tents. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. 1 Samuel 17:4. Remember, David had never witnessed or heard the challenge of the giant of Gath. He sees a giant man covered in armor shouting threats and challenges and cursing the God of Israel while looking across the battlefield. Now this is the 40th day the Israelites are facing Goliath, but it is the first time for David. In 1 Samuel 17:26-27, "And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him." Saul had concocted a scheme to entice someone to kill the giant. The problem was, he was the only man in the camp of Israel who was capable of fighting Goliath. He was taller and more robust than all the others, and was the leader of the people. Saul devised a strategy that ideally would draw someone else into combat, promising the man who killed Goliath a great reward, including his daughter's hand in marriage and a tax exemption for his father's house. A bride, great wealth, and a tax-free life don't sound too bad, right? Yet it was not enough to draw a volunteer. The people in David's immediate surroundings informed him about the incentive plan, which included a variety of external motivations. So here is David, dressed in his simplest shepherd's attire and armed only with his most basic shepherd's weapons, his sling and his staff, ready to fight. Then comes the turning point in 1 Samuel 17:41-46. "And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him. For he was but a youth and ruddy and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." Imagine the possibilities. David stood undaunted before this massive creature. All David had was a sling and a stone against a giant wearing 200 LEBs of armor. A stone hurled through the air, and that was all it took. Goliath fell like a sack of stones. In 1 Samuel 17:47-51, "And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose, and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword, and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. After this, the Philistines did not stay. They scattered when they realized that their champion was dead. Afterward David brought the head of the Philistine to Jerusalem. As for Goliath's weapons, David had to use Goliath's own sword to kill him. The narrator says that the hero kept his weapon inside his tent. They simply remained there as trophies. This crucial conflict between giants teaches us 4 things. First, facing giants is an intimidating experience. With the perfect perspective and a safe distance of thousands of years, we can look back at the boldness and victory of Moses and David. However, consider even with the eyes of faith what it would be like to face the intimidating presence of such a brute. David, however, asserted, "My God is greater than him." Second, you have to enter the fight. No one else can fight for you.
Your OG is your OG, your giant is your giant, and your Goliath is your Goliath. Do not worry, someone would say, but it is a Goliath to you. No one else, not even a counselor or pastor, not even a father or a friend can fight for you. Third, God provides a sense of security. Moses and the Israelites defeated theirs with confidence in God, which served as a source of stability in their lives. When you have spent a significant amount of time on your knees, it's surprising how stable you can become. However, if you try to defeat the giant in person, you will fail. Fourth, acquiring victories is an experience that will stay with you. We are expected to remember the successes we had in the past. We are expected to share our stories of lions and bears, as well as our personal victories against Goliath. Maybe you do not know what is on the other side of the valley. Maybe you have no idea what giant it is, but it's there, lurking. That uncertainty alone is huge. But compared to the Lord God himself, say with faith, "The battle is yours, Lord, it's your fight, I trust in you. I give all my weapons and abilities to you, and present myself before you, trusting in you." If this content was valuable to you, I ask that you support me with your subscription so that you do not miss any of our upcoming videos. Together we can enlighten more minds and expand our understanding. Thank you for being here, and may God bless you.